Zoom.
All right, we're official. I am so darn excited to have Holger Nils Pohl here with me to talk about his newly launched book on Kickstarter called Creating Clarity. And Holger and I had the great pleasure of meeting each other at UViz. Was that 2018? I think.
At least, yeah, perhaps it
That's
was,
about
yeah,
right.
2018 or 17 or something. Yeah, it's quite a while.
Yeah, yeah, in Denmark. And definitely got to nerd out, long talks, nerding out. And I know that you were somewhere in the process then. And believe me, none of this is about, the length it takes to write a book. I know my second book tried to kill me. I hope that wasn't the case with you, but I know that back then we were starting to talk about this book, and I can say it's just so freaking exciting that they are being printed, they are being funded, they are being printed, and soon your new book, Creating Clarity, will be out into the world. So high five first for that.
Hey.
Hooray.
Hey.
I know what this feels like.
Yeah, it's a big
and you're for sure, and you're still standing, which is awesome, and still smiling. So
still smiling. Yeah, even more now.
Good. Awesome. So I would love, this is the really basic, like, where did the spark of this idea come from? And knowing the work it takes to get a new book, a new resource out in the world, like just something about why we need this book, and what made you put all this great hard work into making it a reality.
Yeah. So I think it started a while back. I think I always try to remember the exact date, but I had a good workshop done with Christian Rangen. It's a Norwegian friend of mine 10 years ago. So, and he said at the Copenhagen airport, he said, like, you need to write a book about what you do. Yep. And I said, like, yeah, I don't know, like a lot of people write books, and I don't know if I have to say enough for a whole book, right? It feels like too thin. But it somehow stuck with me for a few years. I didn't work on the book, right? But he said, like, there are not enough books about visual tools and how to use them, right? And how we can make work better with visual tools. Yep. And there can't ever be enough books. And I agree with that opinion. There need to be more and more books about this topic, and of course, all the others. And for a few years, I did nothing. But then more and more of my business friends said, like, couldn't you write a book about what you do, right? You always that guy who comes in, brings us clarity, right? Draws something out or uses visual tools, help us understand how to use them better. Please put that into a book. And the pressure got higher and higher. And I thought, okay, let me start. I had a good friend who said, don't do it. He said, like, don't do it. It will cost you a lot of energy, a lot of time. Is that really worthwhile? And I thought about it, and I thought, like, yeah, I will try it. I will try it. So my first tryouts were basically just sticky notes on the wall. And I kept in that phase for a long time. I think for 3 to 4 years, I just had sticky notes shifting around. This is something I can tell people. This is something I can tell people. I tried to figure out what of the things that I teach and that I do in workshops is actually something that works in a book. And you know that as well, right? Figuring out what is that. And I'm not sure, we never talked about that, Brandy, but for myself, I'm more of an intuitive teacher, meaning I struggle to plan ahead. And therefore, I often don't know what I want to say 5 minutes before I say it or something, right?
Totally with you.
Yeah. Which makes it even more difficult to put that into a book, because again, if you're intuitive, often enough you forget what you said 5 minutes ago, right? And then it's hard to capture. Even if we draw a lot, it's still hard to capture what you want to put in a book. And that's why it lingered a bit. I had 2 good friends, Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur, right?
Can I pause you?
Yeah.
Just for the intuitive part. You kind of look, and this will happen to you in the time ahead, is like, over time, do you feel like there's anything missing from the book? And my big thing was, a very good friend of mine, very shortly after the book was out in the world, she goes, well, this is all about intuition. And I realized I wrote over 400 pages and never talked about intuition because it was the nose on my face. Like, I could not see it. So I just wanted to add that as, like, yeah, I hear you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me, these 2 friends.
Yeah. they helped me, like Alex Osterwalder and Ipunier. They are the creators of the business model canvas and value proposition canvas.
Yep.
And both conceptual thinkers, and they helped me through the process. So I worked with them very closely in terms of how could we structure this. I did a lot of pivots, and then I didn't have the right tool to write that damn book. And you know, it's all about tools, right? Because
Yeah,
I couldn't write in Word because that's only words.
Yep.
I couldn't write in Scrivener because that's a writing tool and it's only words. So I couldn't write in longhand because that was kind of tricky. I couldn't just do everything on paper because that was not always available. So I was in a catch-22 in terms of how do I do that?
Yep.
And funnily enough, I decided for Procreate. So I wrote the whole first draft in Procreate. So I took my iPad. In Procreate, you have a text editing tool. And I created a rough layout and duplicated that drawing. So every double page in the book is one drawing in Procreate.
Yep.
And I had the typing. And when I had an idea for a graphic, I could draw something on the side. I could continue write. I could draw, write, draw, write.
Yep.
That was the perfect process for me. And then it somehow kicked off that I could start producing really content. Before, I had the struggle of how do I actually get this on paper as a visual person? Because I can't just write my thoughts down.
Well, you know, when the tool isn't right, like there's already enough really good challenge and tension in the creative process itself. Then if you add the tension of knowing you don't have the right tool, you know, So was each double page spread was a file? Was that the idea?
Yeah, it's basically one drawing file, like one picture in Procreate. If you imagine Procreate, you have like, we have 348 pages. So half of that in terms of pictures in a Procreate folder. Which created another mess because I needed to copy that over to InDesign later on.
Got it.
Step by step.
I'm just thinking like you can see one spread at a time. So for me, I'm thinking about flow. There, you know, like
so
was it a lot of printing out and sticking stuff to the wall?
Not a lot of printing out. Let me get my iPad for a second and show you how it looks like in the iPad. Because when you have Procreate, you can have that overview. And I would just hold
were you just looking at like the file folder?
Yeah.
Gallery. Okay. I don't know Procreate, so I'm kind of extrapolating.
Yeah. So what you have is this view of the book. So, and you can then see all the pages. And if you created them yourself, especially with the drawings on it, you know exactly what it is, right? Yeah. And then you can move them around. So you can take one and drag them around, right?
Yep. Perfect.
So that's how you see the whole flow compared to that. But I as well printed them at some stage and put them on the wall, right? Yep. To have more like ability to switch easier in terms of bigger chunks, paper by paper, and had that for a long while. I had the spreads on the wall. I printed them out very small because I didn't have enough space, right? And then had them there. So that's how I did that. And then afterwards transitioned to InDesign to the layouting and all that kind of stuff. And what I figured over the years is that, so you asked the question, why do people need the book and why did I write it? Then a lot of people ask me, how can you create so much clarity when you are with us? So I tried to put that into a book to help people do it themselves, right? And that's my central motivation. And you have read it, I tried to put as well visual tools in it as a library so people don't have that burden of saying, okay, that's all cool, but like what kind of tools should I use, or what is that exactly when you're talking about that? So I put a library in there as well, so people can drag and drop basically what they just need in that moment. And I think it took me 7 active years to create that book, from the sticky notes to the finished book.
Again, high five. High 7. The extra years there.
Yeah.
The couple things. It's so interesting that how you just shared how Procreate became the, became the right tool to be able to see and move and iterate. When I was looking at the the kind of galley proof you sent me via PDF. It was funny. I was scanning through it, and I think one of the big strengths, I'm sure this is full of many strengths, but a thing that stood out immediately was how you're saying kind of in the bulk of the book, there's these 3 steps. And then within these 3 steps, each one of them has 3 or the 3 parts of the process in the cycle. And then each of those parts has 3 types of tools.
Actions or
actions, is that what do you call them?
Yeah.
Excellent. So 3 actions within each of those. What do you call is it a phase or
framework? Yeah, it's understand, create, share, right? Yes.
So throughout the book, you keep coming back to a double page spread, which is very much the orientation of, we're here, and you highlight which step we're on. And as I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, this really does have a feeling like a slide deck.
Yeah.
Like that, we're always going to come back to this. We're always going to come back to this. And so the fact that, you're looking at it, for me, in my vernacular, it's the stack, like having that stack where you can kind of move things around and be able to see this is what this is. So, I thought I really appreciated as I was scanning it. I think that something I still struggle with is, I think this kind of gets back to the intuitive part too, just how ingrained our tools are within ourselves. This is just, I think for both of us, is probably our natural way of working. We continue to work in these ways. Nobody got in our way and they praised us, so we continue working.
Let's just continue with it, right? Seems to be right.
Exactly. And then somebody from the outside, like, I love that people are like, you need to get this in a book. And it's like, it's so internal, it's so ingrained. So how do you pull it out? And I think that for mine, I think that I was like, I'm talking about the Idea Shaper book. It's like, I gave you this big giant glass jar full of good stuff. And I don't know that the label's very clear on the outside. And so as I was looking at the copy, I was like, oh, Holger did a much better job, like setting up the label on the front of the jar, that it was sort of like much more orientation around the types of people who could use visual thinking, the, different applications, and just so definite kudos for much better kind of making the case for it in the first place. My thing is like, well, once you're convinced,
right,
really
just go here, right?
Exactly. You can fish out, what you need in the big giant jar.
It's an interesting point, Brandy, because I came from that point of thinking, even though we have a lot of awareness around visual tools today, even though we have a lot of books, great books about that, I still think that a lot of people need that allowance or understanding. Why should I use that? Why does that make my work better?
For sure.
Because the burden is pretty high to start doing that, right? So people have resistance when they, like, I mean, that, right? When you give them a marker, it's like, keep that thing away from me. Like, I don't use guns, right? And and so it's kind of, it's that level of, I can't do that. So I never, like, even if I think it would be good, I don't do it. So in the book, I try to give them the allowance to say, look, this is why you should do it, who could do it. And I think it's always, like, at least for me, it's always helpful if you have a process, right? And I heard that, I read that in the Idea Shapers too, perhaps not that explicitly, but I saw, like, with the builds on each other and all that kind of stuff. Because when people have a process, they can link the rest to it somehow. So you have the bigger process, and then you can say, okay, I understand that. So I can link, like, separate elements that are from the book, or even something that I already knew to it, and then leverage it. And therefore it's easier to as well retain, right? When they are in the midst of action. I remember it. I should first spend some time of understanding the problem, right? I understand that from the book, and therefore tap into that mindset.
This is the I haven't even looked to see how much it's explicit or not explicit in the Idea Shaper book, but like this idea of what as I was looking at what you shared with me, I'm like, oh, it warmed my heart, because it was just so process focused. That is my mantra, is process over product, not the product, not that getting something accomplished and creating a product is not important. The issue is we think we can magically come up with a product fully formed. And so then when we don't, we beat ourselves up, you know, and it is all this, like, I can't do this, and da, 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 da. And you're like, it's because we don't live in cultures that give us any space for process.
True.
Nobody, it's very rare people talk about their process. We know that because we're cultivating environments and rooms for people to get work done, we know how much care we've put into those spaces to help people feel comfortable being in the process.
Yeah.
And when there is that environment, when there is that allowance, when there is that permission, when you give people great tools, I mean, I love the joy I get to see when people are working things out. You know, there's definitely could be some hesitation. There's always some, I mean, just generally, not even specifically to visual tools, but when we're facilitating groups, you know, to watch those dynamics and see the folks who are just like ready to roll. They're like, wait a second, we're all in the same. I know virtual is a different is a different bend, but you know, we're all here live together working through this. And you know, so to get to witness those processes is incredible. I have a quick aside just because it's one of my favorites. It was a format where I was giving about a 45-minute keynote about what I call 4 pointers and a rule of thumb, like a really quick, like here's 4 idea shapers that'll get people working quickly. And then the rule of thumb is process over product. And then we were with this group, and it was salespeople across this big organization. Like it was a food and beverage company, salespeople. They of course looked at me like I was an alien at the start of this, of the session, right? And so, and I'm doing my lecture part, the sage on the stage thing, and then we were transitioning into. They were immediately going to get to use those tools in breakout sessions using scenarios. So like, I love that it was immediate application. So watching again the body language of like very set back, and then like not everybody, but watching the leaning in. And when we went to transition, one of the most senior people in the room, he took the paper, there was flip charts and paper on the tables. He took the sheet of paper off of his table, put it on the floor, and was immediately on his hands and knees on the floor, like, I'm ready. The rest of his group were like, what are you doing?
So where are you going? Like, yeah. Right.
But it was just so wonderful to see like how ready he was. Another gentleman came up partway through that breakout session, and he was like this. He's like, this is so great. I feel like a little kid. And I was like, have you told your shoulders that?
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't look like it.
Exactly. Bless him. Anyway, the point, such clear stories of like people being ready, ready to just get working and playing at the same time with process.
True.
Do you have something to add to there?
Yeah, if I can plug something here, because I found that interesting. And let me draw something quickly. I need to change the camera for that. Hope the rest setup is okay. Still, can you see me?
All good.
Cool.
Yep.
Just saying, if I may plug the Understand, Create, Share framework,
of course,
framework, right? What I figured was that everything we do underlies that basic framework. It's so, I mean, the framework, and it's basically so simple that it's sometimes silly to talk about, but I find that a lot of people don't think about it enough. Yep. So no matter if you solve a challenge or if you run a workshop, you run through these phases of first understand what you want to do or understand what your teacher is telling you, create something with that, and then share that with somebody else to then learn something about what you did and do it better next time, right? Yep. And what you just explained with your keynote was exactly that, right? You had your teaching part that was understand. Right? Then people had a breakout session working on whatever they had, the scenarios, working on solutions and trying that out. And I guess, as I know you, somehow they shared, right? Either in the breakout or with you, they shared back what they did. And what you create with that is more than just a learning loop, right? Sometimes you see that in agile loops as well. But what you create with that is engagement, right? Because when you stay in a keynote in understand, for the whole time and let not people do something, they fall asleep, right? If you have that dynamic, right? Yep. That really begins to shine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. just wanted to say that. I think that's something that I find very important, especially when it is about the mindsets that you go through in a project or in a workshop or in keynote. Always be aware that you want people to understand something, but they need to do, right? Create, and they need to share that because they are proud of that, and that will help them do it next time again.
And this is totally the lone wolf in me. Is this framework only meant for group work? Because I always look at the share part and I go, what if I'm working by myself?
Okay, yeah. So like I would argue that you never work completely for yourself, or very seldomly, because at some point you have somebody you show it to. If you really purely have something that you work solely with, I think it's a good idea to share that with yourself in a different way than you created it, right? So if you like, let's say you have created a piece of art and you don't want to share that with anybody else because it's pretty personal. But do you really acknowledge your work by, for example, placing it on the wall, stepping back and say, this is what I've created, right? This is how I like it. This is what I want to do different next time. That's sharing to yourself. And then next time you build that in to the next piece of work. And I think, so I would say for the lone wolves, definitely yes, share it with yourself, because that's appreciation for yourself. Often enough, we create, and then we create the next, and we burn out over time because we don't take the time to share with ourselves what we achieved.
Yep. I think just you were talking about the element of like a little bit different perspective and being your own spectator. I think a huge thing is just that element of stepping away and coming back. You know, that shift in that kind of, you know, having fresh eyes where you're like, oh, I was so far in it, and now now that I come back to this and see it again.
True. That goes for concepts and books as well, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I had my final draft of the book and then just laid it aside for 4 weeks, came back to it, I read it and felt like, who wrote that? It's kind of, you have those fresh eyes and see something like, yeah, that's stupid, let's change that. And oh, that doesn't work. Okay, that's cool. Oh, that does really work well. So let's keep it. So the fresh eyes are pretty important.
For sure. I have 2 times with the Idea Shapers where I thought I knew what the scope of the book was, and one way it had to grow, and then another big way it had to grow. Like first was I pretty much had almost everything done, and then I was teaching my 3-day lab here in Chicago, and I demonstrated something on a flip chart, and I did this thing, and I turn and I look at my 6 lab partners and I go, this needs to be in the book, doesn't it? And I was like so close to done, and I'm like, here's another 12. It's actually the demonstration at the end of the pyramid about scale and hierarchy, this example of food. So that specifically happened those 3 days. I'm like, all right, I gotta
so intuitive.
Right. And then the big thing was, and this very much to, you know, we were just before we started recording, we're talking about, you know, learning from other people's mistakes with Kickstarter campaigns. When I launched my Kickstarter campaign, I thought my book was about the length of the previous one. And then through the process, through fresh eyes, I was like, oh, this book is way too conceptual. I need to bring these stories to life by ending each one of the chapters with what I call, you know, this idea shaper at work. And that grew the book about 25%. Do you have any kind of similar ways where you realize like, oh, I thought it was this, and then it needed to.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I had the book finished. I showed it to 3 people, Alex, Eve, and Tendai. And they said like, it's pretty cool. I even showed that to 60 beta readers, right? In that moment, the beta readers just gave feedback on like, yeah, it's pretty cool, perhaps this, perhaps that. But those, especially those 3 conceptual thinkers, right, said like, it's pretty cool, but you need to shift that completely, because I had the book designed following Understand, Create, Share, and having the tools sorted to the different phases. So every tool would appear within the chapters of the phases. And it was like, it worked pretty well, but like the feedback from the beta readers were really positive. But it was a bit confusing because some tools work for different phases, right? If you just take drawing as a broad tool, visual tool, drawing works for understanding, it works for creating, and it works for sharing. So if you put that into understand, people would assume, okay, that's a tool for understand. It's not really clear.
Yeah.
So
because we're willing to infer things, right?
We do.
Our brains infer, and then you have to remember, like, oh, not, when somebody's learning something fresh, they're learning within a construct, and they're not necessarily making all those connections. Yeah,
exactly. So I had to restructure the whole book, because when I took out the library in the second part, independent from the phases, that made everything change. So that was one of the phases. And I just want to emphasize one point with the Kickstarter. For those who might consider ever being a creator and doing something on Kickstarter, just like a word of caution, if you ever go to Kickstarter and create a project, only do that for a finished product.
Yes.
If it's a book, right? Yes. If it's a book, you have to have written everything, and it needs to be done before you launch a Kickstarter campaign. And the same goes for course, the same goes for cards that whatever you do, the content needs to be ready. It doesn't have to be printed yet, because you want perhaps money like for the printing, but the book itself, the content, it needs to be ready, because otherwise you're doomed. I have an example for that. I did the testing at the UVis already, right? With the like a makeup book. I did this one here. You might remember that. This book here.
Yes. Yep.
And this is just a makeup, right? So I covered old books with like just standard textbooks, right? With the cover, and placed it in the bookstore at the UVis, right? And gave it to people. And it was a pre-order, right? So people could scan that, pre-order the book as well. Within the book, they had this secret chamber, and they could take a flyer out, and like that was pretty cool. And people, like I had roughly 70 people buying the book through this method, which was a great sign for me to say, okay, I should really finish that. But that was 3.5, 4 years ago. So those people are waiting 4 years for that damn book, and they paid already, right? So that is definitely a mistake I made, letting them pay before I finished the book. That would be a good experiment if I had faked the purchase, right? So they go there, they see it, they say, I want to buy it. And then I say, thank you, that was an experiment.
Right.
Making them buy made me feel anxious all the time, because
right. No, I was going to say, like, I'm one of those people who pre-ordered it, and I'm personally not feeling like I want the book to be out in the world. Yes, absolutely. Am I like,
yeah, but you are you, right? There are other people out there.
No, but I've been on the other side of it with my Kickstarter, because I thought, oh, I'm pretty darn close to done when I did my Kickstarter launch.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't just the pressure of creating the thing. In my particular case, it was threefold. It was creating the thing itself, completing the thing itself, producing all the doofus extra stuff wasn't necessary, which we did talk about before we started. And then the third was this enormous crushing pressure of being late.
Yeah.
And though there were plenty of people who told me, Brandy, like, we love you, like, we'll get, but why do that to yourself? So I'm really glad you said explicitly, like, no. Yeah, I think you really have to be at the point where, like, book wise, at least, like, because it's so, well, as a Kickstarter backer, my brain just went 13 other places, but as the creator, like, if it's a book, you should be laid out, edited. Maybe you're still proofing. Maybe you're doing some like little tweakies.
I'm still proofing too. So
totally
the last finishing.
But yeah, I think just for anyone who has that specific kind of product, just to emphasize what you're saying, completed manuscript, completed illustrations, completed layout.
Yeah.
And then
yes.
Yeah. I look at my brain went the other place where when I'm looking at other Kickstarters, I think I kickstarted or backed like 50 things at this point. Like, both my husband and I we have to have like, nobody's backing anything, because we both get really excited.
Budget is empty. Stop for this month.
Except, there's a point where we're like, wait, how many things are we waiting on? But it's really seductive to see all these great ideas And then you're looking at these pages and you get like we just backed something where we're like, we honestly don't think this thing is going to happen, but we still we agreed.
Exciting.
We're like, yeah, we're just like, you know what, we're kind of saying goodbye to this money. Anyway, point was, I think looking at being able to like, and this is very much of the acuity and looking and like know what you're looking at. A book is a little different. It's much more of a known object. But when you're looking at like concept sketches, like it's so interesting to look at what somebody is proposing and like sussing out how real is this, you know, and that's just a conversation about like the veracity of like the truth of images and what we read into them, but whole nother conversation.
If somebody's making up really great pictures, they can sell you everything. Yep. Yeah, that's a process over product issue. We have so many conversations in my community and workshops and all these good things where it's like it's that inner critic, it's the perfectionist, it's the folks who feel like this. After the book was done, I then had the book was painful. I love the book, but the whole process was really painful. I love the book too.
Thank you. The joyous part was when I created the online course that, you know, basically people would look at the object of a book and go, this is too dense. Like you're throwing me in the middle of that jar and I don't know what to do. So the course became a step-by-step. That was super joyful. And where was I going with that? Oh, at one point there, I came up with like people tend to be one or the other. They either tend to be messy Mel, where they're really comfortable with the messy part. And they're like, I don't know what it is yet. So what? Like, it's ugly, it's smudgy, I've scratched things out. Or tidy Tilda, where, you know, they tend to go to finished and things that are finished and refined and ordered and aligned because that's the comfort, right? That's the perfectionist. Right. And usually my big thing is the big danger is you're pushing something too far into refinement before it's ready. You know, you're making something look more done than it actually is, but that's just a spark that came from the.
I would like if that's okay, I would like to build on that, Brent,
please,
for a second.
Of course.
And want to draw something on this quickly.
Excellent.
Because what you say is, and that's something I have with my clients as well very often, and I wanted to see if you agree with that, is you start a process or a project with an idea, or you identify a challenge, or you just have like an emotional drag to create something like a visual or so, right? And you have that finished product in the end, right? That could be a real product. Let me draw a gift quickly, or whatever it is, or even a business that you run, right? You want to build a business on this idea. And a lot of people think that this is kind of a straight line, right? And that's the product idea, right? When they start, and that's what you just say, right? If you have product over process, people assume that this is the reality, right? But the real reality, and you've seen that squiggle 1,000 times by now, is you make a step forward and back, and now it doesn't work. Go back, the idea is crap, let me do again. And you do that process until you eventually find out that you end up here and not at that what you ended up first or wanted to end up. And it's a messy process. No matter if you create a picture, right? Because creating a picture would be, you do some sketches, you try the layout, it doesn't work at some point. And it goes the same for business models. It goes the same for solving problems, whatever it is.
Completely.
And what you just say, and that I found that interesting, is because I found out about that only the last 3 months or something, that you can't feel comfortable in this, never, because it's always uncertain. You, like a lot of people say, you need to feel comfortable with uncertainty, and I say like, but you can't, right? Because it's uncertain. How can you? Does anybody really feel certain in uncertainty? I'm not sure, right? But what you can feel certain is that you have a process, let's say agile, you work in a small increment and say, test something, however you want to call it, if you call it agile or lean or creative, or I don't mind, but it's the process of I test something, I do a loop, does it work or not? If yes, I go the next, or I go back and start again, right? And so forth and so forth. And you can feel comfortable within these small sections, I believe so at least, saying, I know I am here right now. I know it is messy out there, but I can focus on my small process to make the next step, either forward or backward, but I know
Yep.
that I will move next time. And I think that is where we can feel comfortable. That is process. That's process over product, because you don't mind what you work like, what the outcome is. You just focus on, this is what I want to achieve today or this week or whatever it is. And then you go next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As you drew the squiggle line,
Mhm.
are you coming back on screen?
Yes, I'm moving
Awesome.
back to you.
Perfect. I was like, he's making the squiggle line, and I'm like, but where are the cycles? Where are the cycles? Like
Yeah,
when it
true.
was just this on the page, I'm like, no. This.
Yeah, there are cycles. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think they are so, like, that's so important, right? To really, and I think if people embrace that thought, right? In this world of complexity, no matter if it's a piece of art or if you solve a whole business challenge, whatever you do, you can never feel comfortable with just working on a product because it's messy. You can only feel comfortable in the process to reaching it. That would be my thought.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I think of it as kind of like a quotient. Like I have a very high, or tolerance. Like I have a very, this is one of those things where I can get like, you know, kind of cute or flippant and be like, you know, that's one of the lessons of a really dysfunctional childhood was a lot of experience with uncertainty and instability and volatility.
Right.
But
so you have a higher threshold of that. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think, you know, as much as I can joke about that, I think that might be a factor, but I think another factor is just the amount of experience being in process. Like,
yes.
How many things did I make where I'm like, I thought it was going to be this. And sometimes, you know, sometimes you do have a project that is a pretty straight line and you're thinking, hey, all right. Right. But then there's many more that are, you know, like you'll be in flow state and then things will get crunchy and tense. And, you know, so I have a cycle. I think it's the chapter that's on iteration in the idea shapers. I've got this little cycle where it's like, you know, first you start out and you're like, this is uncomfortable because I don't know what's going to happen. And then you zoom into flow state. And then the flow state slows down and you're just like, this isn't working. And that's usually when I say step away, come back later. But just enough, just enough embodied experience of this is what this feels like. It's going to feel like this. So, but knowing, you know, trust in yourself and enough experience to know that that's okay. Like not get so uncomfortable, not let that discomfort, you know, pull you out of yourself or stop you.
Yes.
And I do want to recognize, you know, you and I both witness this in the work we do, what we can do individually, especially introverts who have their own spaces to do whatever they want in their own time. Recognize that when people are doing that as individuals in a group for their profession, some of those cultures they're working in are really supportive and like, hey, shit's going to be messy. And some of them are like, it's not safe to be messy. So just to acknowledge that, you know, I hope that each person can cultivate that for themselves as an individual because of what it allows us to do. But just, you know, to be realistic that once you start getting other humans together, all in that kind of more vulnerable space, it's, you know, recognizing that's hard.
That's true. I 100% agree with you, Brandy. And I agree that there are a lot of environments where there's no psychological safety. There's a lot of political issues, power issues, like all that kind of stuff going on. And still, I always give myself as an example, right? Just it's a job that I got 3 years ago. I normally seldomly pitch or present for getting a job, right? But like a project. Normally I just work on recommendation. Somebody is reaching out to me. I heard about you. I want to work with you. I say yes. And then we start working, right? So which is a great place to be. In this specific case, a client of me said, like, there's a new team and they have a great project. You need to connect with them because you can help them really well, but it's a pitch. And I said, like, you know, I don't pitch, right? And she's like, please do it, please do it. I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I knew there were two other agencies pitching, like big agencies, and me, right? Because it's a me show, right? I'm not a big agency.
Yep.
So what I did, I didn't know those people, big corporate, high paying, high profile project. And I know they expected a pitch presentation, but I went in, I had prepared a Miro board, a virtual whiteboard with visual tools, right? Yep. And I said, I heard this is becoming a training. So what are the things that are holding your participants back to do their job? And then next I asked, like, what do you think would their jobs actually be that they do on a daily basis? And what would they expect to get out of that? And what do they fear? So now that we spoke about that, where are you in that journey with them right now? Where do you want to get when you work with me? Do you have already an idea how we get there? Can we do that together? And that was 90 minutes conversation. So I tell you, that was somebody foreign to me. I trusted in my process, right?
Yes. Yep.
It was high stake and corporate kind of style, but I didn't care too much. I just put myself out there and I got the job, right?
Yay.
And yeah, that was pretty cool.
Was it a good project?
It
I have
was
to ask though, was it
it's a great project.
Awesome. Excellent.
Yes.
I don't want to assume. I'm glad it was.
It was great, and it was huge, and it develops further even now after 2.5 years. That's pretty cool. Excellent. And but what I tell my participants or clients often, I tell this story as well, because all the people see us, like you, Brandy, and me, talking about this stuff, and they feel like we are super cool and we do all that stuff and we can, like, we just pull something out of our sleeves and everything works, right? But we set ourselves in this situation all the time again when we have somebody we don't know, but we do it still. So I think everybody else can do that too, if they trust in their process and what they can do. They don't have to do it the full blown length how we do it, right? With everything. That's with one or two small things, right? Just put like a board for the agenda and tell people what you plan to do. It's a huge shift for a lot of people, right? And the first increment of helping other people understand we do it different now.
Yep, for sure, for sure.
So people can do it.
I just want to come back to what I love in that story was I bet the other two companies came in with presentations and there was probably no conversation, right?
No, they told them about why they are great, why they should do this project, what they can do, how big they are, and what they had as successes in the past. Well, I didn't even properly introduce myself in the call, by the way. I just like, Holger, you already know who I am because I was introduced. So let's go to work.
Exactly. Exactly. But that shift, that complete, I'm reflecting back on how perfectly it works with the framework, because those folks immediately came in as the actor with the story. And had they didn't understand the client's problem. No. You know, fine. I know business is kind of built around, like, the standard operating procedure is we come in and we prove ourselves before we even know what we're there to prove. But I just wanted to say that, like, I love that you were using your own process to say, like, okay, wait a second. Let's make this a conversation.
Yes.
Whereas, you know, 2/3 of them came in and said, hey, we know what's what.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
And just talking about that, I think that's something that a lot of our followers or clients can leverage as well, that thinking of, try to understand your other person that you talk to. It might be a colleague, a friend, a customer. Why not spend more time understanding what they need, what their challenges are, how you can help them, right? Because we often jump into that solution mode and bring a solution to somebody, but it might completely not fit them. It might be a great solution for somebody else.
Yep, for sure.
And with that attitude, I think you can win more people for yourself, right? In terms of, like, really trying to understand what's the problem here, what's your problem here, how can we solve that together, instead of like, oh, that sounds like something I heard over here, that is the solution. right?
Yep.
So it's that
Completely
kind
with
of
you.
like sticking to it and asking those questions to understand others better.
Yeah. You know, it's such an unbelievable cliche, but it really is. I don't even trust the process. Like, you know, it's like you have a process, you trust the process. Like it's, you know, I know it's been said so many times it sounds meaningless, but it really is. Or even if you don't even know what your like just giving yourself, for me, it's that giving yourself the space to figure it out. Give yourself the grace to be able to be messy, to not know what it is yet, knowing that by giving yourself, you know, shutting up that inner critic, pushing away, you know, yeah, exactly, you know, saying, all right, we're gonna iterate, and it's gonna be weird, and we're gonna figure it out. That's the the place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had something on my mind that just left my head again. So no, I lost it. Let's continue.
Okay. It'll come back.
It's gone. It's somewhere.
Was it to say,
over there? Somewhere
Brandy,
over there.
how could you say such a terrible cliche? Like after I said trust the process, I felt embarrassed.
Such a thing.
I believe it.
Believe
me, I believe it.
Yeah, now that you say it. Thank you for the help.
Yeah.
What I like as well to, like, for myself as well for others, to implement process goals over outcome goals, right?
Yeah.
So just for a few weeks, try that experiment and map your process. What did I do this week? Look back to the week. What did you do? How did you do it? How do you want to do it differently next week, right? And that changes completely how you see your work, because you don't fix on outcomes or something that you create, but rather than how did you do it? And therefore, slowly you're getting better every week. And it's actually easy because you can change small things and you make progress, right? I like the idea of process goals. Sometimes that helps, at least changing that for a few weeks and then see what happens, right? Most likely you will end up in a better place than before.
Awesome.
I lost your voice somehow. I can't hear you anymore.
All right, we had a little microphone that needed more fuel. So you were just describing the process focus goals, and I started to say that, yeah, I just appreciate you saying that, because I don't know that I've ever thought about it that clearly, that distinctly. That, you know, I know, I mean, I definitely know the kind of process how I want to feel while I'm working on something. And I definitely know like what the finished product is going to be, or like you know, much more clear with outcomes. But I just really appreciate that you said that to say, no, like outcome goals, you know, you could distinguish a little more. This is me thinking out loud and it being squishy, that not just about an ongoing process, but that you could actually shape some goals for the process itself.
Exactly. How I do it often, just one more thing on this. I mean, I even have a template in the book, by the way, for a 90-day plan, where I say, like, the outcomes are important still, right? You think like, what kind of outcomes do I want to achieve? But then asking yourself, how do I want to achieve those outcomes? And that's your process. And then every week you recap on like, okay, I tried to do it this way, didn't work so well. What should I change? Or oh, this piece really went well, so I keep that. And so you keep track over time, and it's kind of your personal retrospective, basically, individual retrospective in terms of what do I want to achieve and how do I achieve that.
Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. The over, I mean, I like that specificity. I think that we're both saying, you know, the more it's just giving yourself the process space, you know, giving as you said, allowance or permission to be in that space. It just came up in the workshop I was teaching on Saturday, where it was like, sometimes it really is that lesson of, or a couple lessons of, nothing comes out of anyone fully formed. How we think that, you know, this is something I shared before, and I'll say it as many times as I can, that phrase of don't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. And
Mm.
then the parallel is don't compare your process to somebody else's finished product,
Oh yeah.
because they had their own process, right? Like, I don't know exactly what your 7 years of wrestling this book was like. I can kind of have, probably more empathy than most people
Yeah.
with mine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that just the pressure we put on ourselves is just absolutely enormous. Like, that's just one of the things I'm here to say over and over again is be gentle with yourself and give yourself that space to be messy, and I don't know. I love this is us how we nerded out in Denmark about talking process.
Absolutely.
Like,
And I need to say one more thing on this one too.
Yeah.
Now, like, you're doing the visual arts for a lot of years, right? 2 decades or longer? I'm not sure. Forever.
I'm almost 50 since I was 2.
Yeah, so it's 5 decades, nearly close to. For me, it's 4 decades. I'm trying to catch up, but often people like compare us then to them in terms of drawing skills and and that is so dangerous in all levels of life, right? Somebody, how they speak, how they draw, how they walk, how they do sports, whatever they do. You never know how much practice they put in that you didn't have. It's completely unfair to compare yourself with somebody else. The same goes for books, right? You see somebody like writing a book in a year, right? But perhaps that somebody had enough funding, so they did nothing else than writing, right?
Exactly.
But you feel like, oh, damn, I needed 7 years for that, right? But then the other book is just a textbook, not a visual book. With visual books per se need longer time because you need to draw and all that kind of stuff. So it's really unfair to yourself to compare yourself with others. So stay away from that. I mean, I can't do that very well either. It's always coming back to me, like nagging me. But I need to then like, pish, kick that devil again.
So that, how far are you from Fulda, from where Guido lives?
It's a few hours with the car. So I think 2.5 or so.
I think the first time I came to visit, Guido and Vivian's daughter, and I'm guessing she was maybe 9 at the time. I'm not great with ages, but it was the first time I had met Guido. First time meeting her, we were out for dinner, and she was the kiddo, which I completely relate to. Like, I'm at a restaurant. I'm going to have my paper. I'm going to have my pencils. Like, this is time to draw. And she, her second language she's learning at school is Spanish, so she didn't speak English. So you could just tell it was killing her. Like, Brandy's saying things and I have no idea what it is, right? And so we're both drawing, and she was like so happy to draw, and then she'd like look up and look at mine and literally just go,
all right.
And I just go, honey, give it 30 years.
Sure.
And of course she turned to Guido and said, "Was," and he explained what I said. But that's the thing. Give it 30 years.
Give it time to come through, right? That's so important. I wonder if we have one more second time. I want to show you a screenshot that I just got yesterday.
Yeah,
that
please.
Is super fitting, I think. It is taken from a book from Adam Grant, Thinking Again, that shall be a good book. I didn't read it myself, but a participant had that. I'm not sure. Can I share the screen here? Or
I think I might have to give you. Let me see here.
But otherwise, I can just hold the camera. That's no problem.
No, go ahead.
Is it?
Either way, I think you can now.
I can now. Perfect. So let me see. There is a dog barking in the back. I hope you don't hear that too loud.
You're good.
So you see that picture now. And you see the picture of the butterfly in the top left. That is a student in the 3rd grade drawing a butterfly. And the second drawing in the middle and the top is the same student the same day after getting feedback from his peers on how the drawing should look like, right? What he missed for hitting a real picture of a butterfly. The third one is his next iteration, the 4th the next, and the 5th is his final iteration, always going back to his peers, right, to his other students, and they gave feedback like, no, this is too small, this is too like this and that. And afterwards, he created a colored version. What I found interesting, Brandy, because we say always it's as well about the practice, but the feedback is so important too. That you listen and say, did I get this right? Do you understand what I do? Should I change it in a way, right? And you do that as an artist all the time, either with yourself, that you feedback yourself, or that you ask other people, like, how is that resonating? When I show that to you, how are you looking at it? All these kind of questions. And I found this so impressive that deliberate feedback leads to this outcome. It's still a third grader, didn't spend 10,000 times, 10,000 hours, right? Drawing.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, that is.
I found that insight super, super interesting.
Absolutely. I'm super glad you shared that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was anticipating it would be something like, look at their practice over these many months. And you're like, nope, still same third grader, drawing the same butterfly.
Yes, exactly. Just listening to the feedback, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we need to combine both. And that's where the beauty happens. You test something, and if you test something with others, you tell them, I'm testing, right?
Yes.
I learned this new thing, right? I want to test this with you, and I want you to give me feedback.
Yep.
Right. And then you make it better next time. That's how you can make yourself less vulnerable as well, because if you tell people like, I'm the boss, right? I have this technique, and you don't know that for sure, that is more tricky. But if you are open and honest and say like, I learned this, I would like to test this, I'm not super sure how it works. And you do that, and afterwards you're like, how was it? And what could we do differently? Then you can develop yourself further, right?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the something that comes up a lot in conversations where, you know, imagine there's a bunch of these cycles. One thing is, so often people don't ask for feedback till it's way over here. Right.
They stop, right?
Well, it's the, you know, I can't show anyone until it's like nearly done, you know, and then you show somebody, you know, you say, can I get feedback? And of course somebody's gonna look at it and go like, well, it's done. What do you need from me? Right. So it's the getting more and more comfortable, farther and farther back, and saying, no, really, like that. I do want feedback. Like, we're forming this together. That's
And if you get it, it's way less devastating, right? Because if you get it early, you get feedback on an early stage, that's fine. If you show the book after 7 years to somebody else, like, give me feedback, and they say like, I don't understand a word, then it's
yes,
late, kind of late feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I did have one last question, just curiosity about process and how things change. So in the framework, you've got the understand, create, and share. And then within each of those are 3 actions.
Yeah.
Did you always know what those, like, how did those actions come to be? And did they ever change over time? Was there 2 in one or 4 in another?
Yeah.
So I have the 5 steps in the idea shapers. And this, I always say, like, there's 6 in this one and 3 in this one, because that's how it worked. You know? Right. So just curious, not to say I have anything wrong with each of those having 3. It's more just curiosity about where those came from and if they changed or not.
Yeah, so definitely they are not a representation of reality, I guess, because that would be awesome if everything would be tick, 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 tick. No, so that was a design decision, because I came from the point of, how can I create something that helps people understand how it works? Like, and with it, I mean, solving a challenge, running a workshop, running a project, no matter if you do design thinking, agile, visual facilitation, lean startup, whatever you do, underneath, I think it's the same framework. If you got that right, you can plug in every other of the tools and methodologies.
Yep.
And I thought, how can I make that as easy as possible to not to understand, but to as well remember? And I feel that patterns are easier to remember, that are more equally distributed than remembering like 4, 5, 1, right?
Yep.
You're always missing something then. So that was my original conceptual thinking of, okay, I have 3 phases: understand, create, share. I need to end up with 3 activities, because kind of 3 is kind of like, that small nerd within me was like, yeah, totally. I got it to the point I couldn't manage until the very perfectionist point of having even every activity has 3 words to be described, right? So,
what are you talking about? I've never been. I've
you
never
don't know
been in
that,
that
right?
situation. No.
Never happened to you, right?
Like, well, I was picturing like, I do love the metaphor of a 3-legged stool and the stability, but then as we were talking about this, it was like, then there's a 3-legged stool off of each of those, like, oh, and now there's 3 more little tiny stools. That's
Cool
where my big
pyramid,
nerd
right?
came from.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the beginning I had more, and I was trying to condense those. So for example, let me grab one example. So in the phase of create, I ended up with ideate a lot. That's the first activity. Focus your efforts, second, and then make it tangible, third. Saying when you create something, whatever it is, a prototype or an idea or a drawing or whatever it is, you first create a lot of different ideas that you can choose from. Then you try to figure out which idea you want to continue with, because you need to focus. And if you decided on that, you make it tangible, either in a drawing, or you build a prototype, or you build a slide deck, or whatever outcome you prefer, but you make it somehow tangible that you can show it later to people. So that's the final 3 activities. But when I started, I thought like, well, so they ended up with understand. So they first need a briefing to know what they brainstorm, and they need to develop the questions. And then when they brainstorm, they basically need to cluster first, and then have a decision mechanism to, and so it like have these kind of this area of activities. So I try to boil them down step by step. So I have, and I think you talk about that a lot as well, I have this different zoom levels. So on the highest flight level, so to say, or in a low zoom, do you say high zoom or low zoom? But if you're zoomed out a lot,
there you
then
go.
you only see understand, create, share. That's your 3 phases in everything you do. If you zoom in a bit more, you see the 3 activities. That's good, because then you can actually check yourself, like a sanity check for yourself. In this project, do I still try to understand something? And did I already frame my problem so I know what I want to solve? Or am I already in the phase of create? That helps you in your mindset, because it's a different mindset if you try to understand something or if you try to create something. You have different activities as well in your brain. So that zoom level is orientating yourself, getting into the right mindset. What do I need to do next, basically? Did I miss anything? What you do within ideating a lot, I don't care too much anymore. I thought like some people jump from, I know the problem, and they jump right into a lot of ideas, right? But everybody actually jumps into a lot of ideas. That's what everybody has in common. Some have specific processes to do that. That's fine, but that's not up to me to explain to people. The same goes for focusing. The same goes for making it tangible, right? So that's why I thought I stop at that level. It's somehow like a cluster or a bucket, where you could put in then different tools, right? Different methodologies, different processes as well. I thought that would be a good layer. And that's how I then ended with that. And one more thing is how I came to the framework was I had, like, with the first draft of the framework, I created a lot of cases saying, I drew the framework and I said, how is that for a workshop? Draw all that. How is that for a meeting? How is that for a project? How is that for business model innovation? How is that for design thinking? So I drew like a stack of papers, all with the framework and with examples on how it runs, and therefore then laid them out again and try to distill, okay, what do they have in common? And then put it together.
Excellent.
That was
awesome. Was that how you got the avatars in the book?
The avatars, yes, exactly. That's where I was searching for the different use cases, right? Because I think you can use that for business model innovation as well, for developing your podcast, right? Or talking to your customers, or changing your own life, right? Or whatever. And I thought it would be good to have those different avatars and characters for people to understand, okay, I relate to this person or that, or this activity, and I can pick and choose a bit. Yeah, because that's a bit different, I think, to your idea shapers, where you have a very strong visual aspect, where by definition, it's a bit clearer who can use that. For me, at least, it was. When I was working on the clarity framework, and people ask me, for whom is that book? I said, like, for everybody.
Well, same.
Yeah. And yeah, you see
Yeah.
the same as well. And
yeah,
that is a tricky part. That's why I tried to create the avatars. I think you made it clearer with the examples, right? How does it work? Right.
For sure.
You managed that doing that way. And
Yep.
so the avatars serve me in that way too.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah, I think it's a tricky thing because we know how incredibly adaptable your framework is. My specific idea shaper is like, so who is this for? And it is kind of for everybody.
It is.
That's, that's way too broad for somebody to relate to.
Yeah.
So, it's always, that's a challenge for sure. And that's definitely what I call, not being able to see the label from inside the jar, that kind of like, this makes perfect sense because we live it every day. So the challenge is, how do we invite people in so they understand why these tools are so fantastic?
Yeah, that's true.
Yep. Awesome. So, so currently, as we're recording this, we're in the Kickstarter campaign.
Yes.
And when does the Kickstarter campaign end?
The Kickstarter campaign ends on June 27, 2022.
That was my mom's birthday.
Oh, yeah, wonderful. So yeah,
whatever that's worth.
Sometimes comes together. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's a, like, I invite everybody, if you want to check it out, you just go to Kickstarter and search for Creating Clarity. You will find it. And yeah, you're welcome to join the club.
Yes, and please join the club. I mean, I know I pre-ordered from the mock-up book. Like, I was sold immediately. So. But also for folks who are watching this after June 27th, what's the best way to get the book?
So it will be linked on Kickstarter as well. So if you search there, you can or you go to my website, right? holgernilspohl.com, my whole name.
Excellent.
We might put that somewhere, and you can find it there, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I definitely have my bookshelf of, Uzmo, Martin Hausman's books, your book, my book. Like, we got a really nice family of very interesting siblings that I'm very happy to welcome your book into. So
yeah. And we can't stop without plugging your book as well again, right? The Idea Shapers. Everybody should go out and search for that one too. Yes.
Thank you.
Highly,
awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for your time. And I'm glad we could nerd out. And talk process and awesome. I have other questions, but you know what? I feel like that's a perfect bow. So we'll leave it there.
It is.
Back Holger's Kickstarter now before it closes June 27th. And both of us look forward to seeing you out in the world and online. Excellent. Thank you, Holger.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
My pleasure.